Hi, welcome to RPG Unlimited, a podcast about tabletop role-playing games. My name is Emma, and I'll be interviewing players, game masters, artists, and content creators for their unique views and processes when they play and or create tabletop role-playing games. Today we are talking with Derek Nekritz, head writer for TheMageCollege, a D&D 5e TTRPG centric site. Let's go ahead and get that information on the podcast. Looks right. The TheMageCollege also has a Patreon and work up on the DM's Guild. Let's go ahead and get project stuff as well. Is it projects or is it project? It was project. It was project. Alright, much better. Okay. Hello, Derek. How are you today? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. So as you said, I'm the head writer and lead designer of TheMageCollege, which is basically a site dedicated to most things 5e and exploring GMing, play styles. When I am not busy being this grandiose pretend archmage, I am a 27-year-old linguist and translation manager, which is kind of weird because those things kind of almost don't coincide. Yeah, in a weird way, it helps me code my spells. I can write my spell book out in a very intricate cipher in Italian, but then that's about as far as it gets.
I think that's a bit more than a lot of other people could say.
Yeah, I mean, sadly I don't know Draconic, but I hear that it's similar to Finnish, maybe? I don't know. It's all conjecture at that point.
Okay. What led to the creation of TheMageCollege?
So this is maybe the worst answer in epic origin stories of all time, but I actually had reached this point where I wanted a creative outlet, and I found myself in the middle of my studies for my bachelor's degree while I was studying linguistics, and I decided, you know what? And then one day, out of the blue, I said, you know what? I'm going to start a blog about tabletop role-playing games. And I just did that then and there, that day, and said, here we go, we're doing this. Simply because it struck me at that moment in time, and I didn't feel like doing my homework either in that moment.
Greatest excuse to not do homework ever.
Yeah, I was like, I came up with this moment where I said, oh, well, I'm starting a blog. What am I going to call it? Who am I? Like, I had no idea where even to begin, because so many blogs are, yes, it's this official sounding thing. The author is so-and-so. And I said, well, I want to sound like I have some idea of, like, that I'm almost like a credible source. I was like, well, who would you listen to? Archmage? Yeah, sure. I'm Archmage Derek, I guess, and this is TheMageCollege. And it almost was exactly what it sounded like at the time, which my class levels would be in Bard. So really, I was just kind of lying to myself and everybody else about what was going on, and it just stuck. Within a few months, I had submitted an article to the team over at Mage Hand Press, and they featured an article of mine. I'd even done a subclass that they featured, which got me a little bit of traffic. And then one day I said, oh, well, why don't I start like promoting myself on Twitter after like 3 or 4 months of having like the same like 12 to 15 people come by, which was kind of neat. It's like, hey guys, the usual crowd. And then I migrated to Twitter, which that's really where it got me today.
And I can see that. Even before getting into role-playing and stuff, when I migrated from Facebook to Twitter, it was a huge explosion. It's the difference in interaction between Facebook and Twitter and how they handle things that really has a lot to do with it. At least I feel, in that sense, I would say MySpace back in the day did better than Facebook does now.
Mm-hmm. I would be inclined to agree with that. Facebook to me often feels like I'm reading through junk mail for no reason, even though it's people that I know in real life. It all feels like, okay, all right, I'm going to sidestep this thing. I definitely don't have the mental capacity to deal with this at the moment. So, there's a really supportive, very alive and interactive notion with Twitter that I think it's very, very easy to engage with people and find things that really do catch your interest. Which I think some people might ascribe to, like, oh, well, your short attention spans and your 280 characters or something, which is totally untrue, by the way. If you have questions about whether or not use Twitter, the answer is do, please. There's a great community.
Not only that, you have the ability to create threads, so it's not just the 280 characters. It's, for me at least, it's, hey, I have to be a bit more thoughtful with how I structure things, but if I want to go on a rant, I feel like I've got a much better soapbox than I do on Facebook, where it's just, like you said, it feels like junk mail. It didn't used to, but it definitely, I agree with that comparison.
Right, yeah, there's something about seeing the read more button, which is almost like reverse psychology, where it actually means don't read at all.
Well, especially when you get into like articles by various sites, and it's, you click 300 times and you're still not done with the article. It's like, okay, can we get more than 2 sentences on a page?
Right. It's like, here, see this slideshow for this thing that we're not actually going to give you. Yeah, there's definitely a quality of sincerity and realism, or maybe not realism, but there's a genuine feel behind Twitter, because it's much more made of people that make being a creative that much easier, because you know that those things aren't just going to be glossed over.
For those who don't know what TheMageCollege is, do you care to tell me a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. So the TheMageCollege, we feature a number of articles about TTRPGs and how you can incorporate varying play styles, GMing styles, different GMing techniques, or character building options. So, say for instance, we recently had a series called Multi-Class Mastery, which takes a concept, and it might be a very popular concept. So, say for instance, in one such multi-class mastery, you have the concept of a master thrower, which everybody wants to be that guy like Bullseye from Daredevil, who can throw anything, and it's always super accurate and super cool, and you always hit the target and you never miss. But there's nothing in 5e that lets you do that, really. There's nothing where in Boldface says, you're good at throwing things. So people who are coming from 3.5, or places in 4e or in Pathfinder, where they have notions of the Master Thrower or the Flying Blade, they say, well, gosh, now my favorite thing has been left out. How can I really establish that? So what our multi-class mastery article features do is we say, okay, well, you can take a bit of this over here, like the Battlemaster Fighter and some of the Hunter Ranger, and here is a couple of neat other feats, or I might even in one of these articles design something to go with it. Like I designed throwing knives, which currently in 5e don't exist, other than just daggers, because yeah, they're throwable, but we don't have throwing knives. Because that's a necessity, right?
Or do something crazy and let's say ran out of arrows. Well, I'm going to shoot a dagger with my bow.
Right. You have these very creative, maybe not necessarily entirely based in reality solutions, but they are solutions nonetheless. So in our articles, we tried to present ways of different perspectives, because we don't want to tell people that this is how you play a game. Because the ultimate lesson there is that tabletop role-playing games are, if anything, subjective. Even things that would otherwise be as seemingly innocuous as, is Beastmaster Ranger actually bad, or is it actually good? And you'll have these giant arguments on Twitter where people say, no, Beastmaster's not great, or no. But we try to present ways of thinking about things that will expand people's understanding of the game that they're engaging in. We also create a lot of third-party content, or you might use the term homebrew content, for D&D 5e, such as new subclass options. Like, for instance, this past week or two ago, we created the Primeval Mystic at the behest of a host of another podcast I made an appearance on, which he said, hey, I really liked the idea of making a wizard that learns druid spells and has like elemental powers and stuff. Can we make that happen? I said, you know what? Give me an hour and 45 minutes and I can make that happen. And sure enough, I did, which
That's
he had been
cool.
struggling. It's, yeah, some days you get lucky where you just kind of let the theme kind of comes together. Other days you get ones that take me about a week of sitting there going, I can't live with this. Nobody can live with this. This shouldn't see the light of day. So by the time that I had finished it, it was at least something that I was very confident in. And he was amazed because he had been after this concept for a long time, ever since he had departed with the character in 3.5. And he's like, wow, it's like, I can't believe you just came up with it. I was like, well, you know, I had inspiration. And one thing that I often surprise people with is that what I do, and this is the part where I put myself out of a job, is it's not too difficult to be able to take things from theme to mechanics. Because a very good friend of mine, Rudy Rutenberg, the DM of Maze Arcana, or Maze Arcana's Inkwell Society, always stresses to me that narrative should inform mechanics, and mechanics should facilitate narrative. So say, for instance, if you wanted to okay, here, we'll make this a fun, interactive bit. If you were to see a subclass made, what would you want to see? Like a scene you feel has...
I think I'd have to figure out I mean, there's the one I mentioned earlier. The Danger Druid would be a crazy subclass.
Right. So, okay. So a druid that kind of interfaces with danger and risk and so basically, when we would take a raw idea like this, right, a single sentence, a druid who lives dangerously, experiences life to the fullest, well, we might take that theme and then we might expand on, if you were to tell me a story about them, what does that look like? And when you walk through it, what you're then doing is you're trying to extrapolate from the themes of it into where you can find pieces in the mechanics. An awesome example of this would be, and how they did it in official material, is the Swashbuckler from Xanathar's Guide to Everything and Swordcoast Adventure's Guide. Now, I, in real life, actually am a fencer. And I was raised at our state's most popular Renaissance festival, and my father was the head of the fencing game for a while. So swashbuckling is in my blood.
Like for the win.
Yes, like it's who I am as a person. So voila. And when I saw the Swashbuckler subclass, I was really impressed because it does exactly what you might expect a character of that nature to do. It's, you have your rakish audacity, you're this charismatic, panacheful fighter, that everything is a big flourishing flare and then followed up by some winning, precise strike. But if you're thinking about this, how do you take that into making it some rules that you can use at the table that some guy next to you doesn't go, oh, no, that's broken. We can't have any of that at the table, which is a challenge.
I mean, but have these people met pirates that are saying that? I'm just saying. Because I do, there's a thing they have, well, it's not just Oregon, but there's a group I participate with here in Oregon that does about 3 to 4 full immersion events that are full weekend events during the summer.
Wow.
And so it's like, the pirates are over the top in OP because they sacrifice all this other stuff to pull that stuff.
Right. It's unorthodox. It's surprising, and that's kind of what brings that charisma to not only their engaging in fights, but also in the reason why that squaring off against them, they're such good duelists, because they do the unorthodox. They do the my father had a favorite technique of his, which was kind of like an old musketeer's trick, where you would, and it works, which is infuriating, especially when he's teaching you how to use the weapon, is what you would do is you would take the point of your sword and you would bounce it off the tip of the person's shoe. So as they reacted and stepped back in surprise, that's when you would then hit them in the chest with the sword itself. And it was frustrating, and it worked. And my dad was even lucky enough to face Olympic fencers at his game and would win because he had all these dumb, panacheful swashbucklers maneuvers that actually worked. They are roguish in essence. So taking that concept, taking the I fight like it's a performance and it's a show, and because look at me swagger onto the battlefield, taking that into whenever you are within 5 feet of an enemy and you have no other creatures around you, you get to deal sneak attack. People often don't see the bridge there, but walking through that process, walking through, a danger druid who might be a little too frivolous with some elements of nature, and being able to survive them. So it's like, what, are you resistant to damage? Do you take less poison damage particularly? Do you have advantage on constitution saving throws against harmful substances, so to speak? You're starting to look at what those things are representing and how they can really bring the game to life. Because the game doesn't happen on paper, even though we might say pen and paper game. The game happens here with the ability to manipulate metaphor, if you will.
Well, especially if you can take, I saw Rudy's tweet earlier about moving away as DMs from asking, well, or not so much asking, but for letting players call for when they make ability checks, being like,
absolutely,
I don't want to hear you've got nature +3, I want to hear what you do.
Exactly. And that's very much something that falls with that classic statement of his, is that when you are thinking about the narrative, that's what's the interesting part. And not to say that you can't have a game where you say, I open the door and now I'm going to use, this awesome feature that I've been waiting to use, because you're engaging with the game of it. But as tabletop role-playing games have been moving towards a precedent of storytelling and narrative, in order to really engage with it, you might find yourself more readily engaged by creating the narrative description, because that's ultimately what you want. We're not really excited about the idea of, I'm going to roll dice and I'm going to do math. I don't think really there's many people who play the game that are excited about that aspect of it. We're excited about I'm going to have fun with my friends, and we're going to laugh, and we're going to adventure, and my character is going to jump off something and dodge explosions and those things.
I think I would definitely say it's probably a lot more that are more of the crazy things. First game I ever played, my stepson was in, and he got to roll a new character almost immediately because he had a rogue, and this rogue was going to do crazy things that maybe this rogue wasn't ready to do. Jumped off a roof in one splat.
I mean,
It was a
a risk.
very short-lived. I mean, it was fun for the short bit, but then he had to roll another character. I think that first character might have been more fun to play with if she had survived. If she just had like 2 more hit points so that she didn't like.
Well, no one ever warns you that gravity works in Dungeons and Dragons until you find out the hard way.
You would think you knew that though. Otherwise, your characters would be and you could be playing something else. Who knows?
Well, I mean, with video games like, say, for instance, I've been playing a lot of Kingdom Hearts 3, and I noticed that the protagonist of Kingdom Hearts 3 can fall off of any height and he's perfectly fine. But heaven forbid an enemy throw him and then he's not fine. It's all about the intent. If you're willing to work with the ground's willing to work with you.
It's an interesting way of putting it. I haven't played Kingdom Hearts ever. I had ex-roommates that were really into it, and they played it. It kind of killed my interest because I was like, I just watched you do everything 5 times. I know this game inside and out, and I don't get to discover anything new because you're an achievement hunter and you got every single achievement every time. Good. So yeah.
That makes perfect sense, yeah.
What has your experience as a writer and content curator been like?
That is an interesting question. I find it's a lot like being a new superhero in a way, where, and that sounds extra haughty, but it's, you want to be able to do good things, or at least from my experience, I want to be able to do good things for the community and share my work. And it's a lot like in Spider-Man Homecoming, where the guy sees Spider-Man and he goes, "Hey, you're that Spider guy." Yeah, Spider-Man. Right, yeah. Hey, can you do a backflip for me? It's like, yeah, sure, I guess. And it's a slow process of people engaging with the work, to eventually, it gets to the point where people say, "Hey, I came up with this idea. Can you look at it quick?" And it's weird to go from this guy who literally was just trying to escape homework, to being an expert in this. And the writing aspect of it, that's something that I've always engaged with, because I love writing in college. I was one of those guys that was just like, oh yeah, like 10-page paper? Sure, I will expound into a 12-page paper, simply because I had a few extra ideas in writing, and I went off, course of my outline. The content curation aspect of it, yeah, that's I find content curating is a lot like how my bookshelves look in my home, where it's just sort of like, oh yeah, I've had these books for a while, boom, and I just shove everything next to it and next to one another, and it's not always perfectly organized, but it does tell a story, where you can tell that I sort of have for fans of Ravnica, I have a very Is It League style mindset, where I just kind of do what I fancy, and then I create things, and I enjoy it. The process of creation, to me, is a lot more enjoyable than maybe not, I would say the reward, but it's a lot more enjoyable than the idea of like, oh, I'm going to be a creator and I'm going to do things, right? I'm sharing that love, and I don't really mind it taking a sort of aqueous form, if you will.
What advice would you give to someone just getting into D&D or tabletop role-playing games in general?
Oh goodness. There's a few of them. We might be here for an extra 6 hours, really, if you let me. One of the biggest things I would say is be willing to communicate, because it's your game too. people often forget that everybody at the table is a player, even if they bear the title Dungeon Master or Game Master. And if you are, unsure of how to be able to voice your opinion, then that's something that maybe you can have the table help you either work your way out of the shell, or if it's an environment that you're maybe not comfortable doing that, then maybe examining what that environment is, so you might find one that is comfortable to do that. If you're just becoming a dungeon master, work with your players. I mean, communication is key for every player at the table. That's why session zeros are really popular. Sadly, the many groups start without a session zero, and then they go completely wild, if not immediately, kind of close to immediately. You sit down and say, oh, well, we'll be playing Curse of Strahd. And what you don't realize is that the GM is very much into the horror aspect, and someone says, I didn't know my character would die, and the game master, the DM, points to the large sign that says, welcome to Barovia.
I can see that. I know that my first several years playing, we never did session zeros. I just kind of went in with I only had the one DM for the longest time too, so I only knew this one style of play, which is still loads of fun. We haven't played in over a year now, though. It's ridiculous. But when I did do my first session zero, it's like, oh, we can have input on all this stuff. This is cool, And I know it's something I've started really advocating for. It's like, hey, do a session zero. Are you streaming yourself? Stream session zero too. People are actually really interested in that. So.
Yeah, I actually haven't heard of people streaming session zero. That's really neat.
Because they get to see the formation of the campaign before the campaign starts, so they know what kind of stuff they can expect, and if there's going to be elements they're not comfortable with right off the bat. I think that's a really powerful thing as a streamed game.
Right, absolutely. I actually am very enchanted by the idea of that, because I think that also sets a very good precedent of showing it's like, this is how you communicate what a game's going to look like, or how that's going to play out. And I think by encouraging that openness is definitely an awesome way of being able to share with the community, like, hey, it's totally okay. It's like, if you would talk to your friends about what movie are we going to go see over the weekend, you can also talk about what style of game you're going to be playing every other Thursday for, the next couple months.
Or longer, depending on the group. My first game, we haven't had a conclusion. We had a really crazy thing where we sold up to 21 players at one point. And then a whole bunch of players, including some of the people that were there at the beginning, dropped out. Amongst other things, we had 3 players that ended up with a deck of many. And so we've got people who have like 4 or 5 levels on top of everyone else and all this crazy stuff. This poor guy, he's been working for like 2 years now trying to figure out, all right, how do we move forward from here? Because those of us who are still around, still want to play. We want to play those characters again. That's it.
Yeah, I've kind of been in something similar in a way. It's because when you're adopting all these new players, and because it's that's probably one part of, if you're learning to run a game, is learn to be able to say no, because there does need to be some boundaries in order for a game to run smoothly, whether it's saying I only accept X number of players, or something isn't acceptable, or you need somebody's attention, and even though yes, you're very happy that they get along, it's like, please don't be sharing some new meme or video every 30 seconds because other people are trying to interface the game and enjoy that being able to set those boundaries, being able to create something like that is absolutely paramount.
I agree. So you've been putting content up on DM's Guild. What kind of things are you sharing over there?
So our DM's Guild content is predominantly refined versions of what you'll find in the Mage College. These products are illustrated by our head curator Kana, who is my wife and partner of 9 years now. I got really lucky in the fact that somebody who's really good in the visual side of things happens to be along for the ride. So we create these refined versions of things that come out pretty much in player's handbook style form, which we try to put more content into the DM's Guild side of things, not just simply for the sake of embellishing, but also in the fact that posting things to the blog through the blog. I say that now, but through the website you want something to be a little bit more digestible at time. So looking at a cool subclass, like, oh yeah, cool, I see this one page. But the DM's Guild's content is often far more in depth with the concepts and ideas. And when our friend Natalie joined us, in her honor, we published a subclass that I wrote for her for a game, and then polished up the rules, polished up the lore behind it. Kana did fantastic art for it, which is this beautiful Aladdin character that is just decked out in all these amazing like reds and golds, and it just fit the character very well. So we also do things like the Character Folio series, which are player options based on characters we've actually experienced, either in my own private, I say private, but it's actually going to be the subject of a live stream coming out Sunday. But in our setting, that is sort of become legendary heroes. So for instance, the first one you'll find on DM's Guild is Character Folio Anya, which examines Kana's Tibbet thief. Tibbets are a race of werecats, basically, kind of. Don't get me started on Tibbets. I love them. They're great, but they're also very good at making unsuspecting DMs miserable, because they can just turn into cats, more or less at will. And if you are a thief and you can turn into a cat at will, the logic is nobody suspects the cat. So it's hard to work around unless you have kind of some form of like know-how with how to create challenges for these characters. But that's something like the Character Folio will usually contain like a subclass, feats that are designed around the character's concept, magic items that fit that style of character, or recreations and revisions of items that character, the Character Folio, is about actually used in the campaign.
I would counter that cat owners would totally suspect the cat.
Undoubtedly. No, that's one thing that I frequently remind anybody playing a Tibbet is you can tell when a cat is up to no good. So I would almost say that a Tibbet should have disadvantage on deception checks, simply because cats frequently do that thing where they sort of sit and adjust what they're looking at, or their perspective when they're looking at something. It's like, no, that looks suspicious. Why is that cat looking at that diamond that way?
Yeah. Or why is the kitty doing the little butt shake pounds thing? No, that diamond is not a mouse.
That's weird. That cat looks like it's stalking that ambassador from that other kingdom.
Yeah. I can picture that. It's cute.
It's like, yeah, it's cute. And he wants to play. Oh, it was an assassin the entire time. Wow.
I feel like a bit of charisma comes in on that.
Yeah, it's very funny because Anya herself, this legendary thief, is not very charismatic and not very good at lying. She's actually quite not sort of the people person. She has about the charm and personality of Jessica Jones. So it's very like, yeah, what do you want? Stay away from me. I hate you. Bye. Like, it's very dry, very, very nonchalant. So when she does get caught and she has to talk her way out of something, it's nothing but snark and attitude. So yeah, so being a cat is almost more pleasant than actually dealing with her when she can speak.
That sounds like loads of fun, though. What inspired you to start creating for DM's Guild?
So yeah, it was a process in itself. It even was kind of a process to even begin creating subclasses, because at first I was very much convinced that I would never be capable of it. Which, there's a lesson, everybody, don't sell yourself short. I wanted to be able to give more of an official spin on my work, because there is kind of a negative connotation with the idea of homebrew. And oftentimes people think that that homebrew equates something to what you might find like on D&D Wiki, which is, if you've had those games where it's like, oh, I found this thing on D&D Wiki, and everybody at the table's like, oh no, don't do it. And it's, yeah, see, that's, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm that player.
There's nothing wrong with that. If everybody's having fun at the table, as the RPG Academy says, you're doing something right. But people who are a little bit more sticklers and say, oh no, official content only. Or they'll consider something that's homebrew, or they'll look for that one very tiny thing. It's intimidating, and especially if you want to be a third-party content creator with the hopes of maybe doing something more official. Because I know, heavens, I'd like to work for Wizards of the Coast one day. And DM's Guild is a venue where it definitely bridges the gap, where the Mage College is very much like my little testing zone, testing grounds, if you will, where I say, okay, I have this idea, I have this rough sketch of this subclass, and even though I might not have tested it or anything, this is basically the idea I have for it. People can come engage with that. DM's Guild is for quite literally when I think it's gotten to the point where it's good enough to sell, which sounds awful to say out loud, but it's definitely a way where, as a creator, you know, it gives me the opportunity to make something for my time, which is great that DM's Guild does that to begin with. So many people have really have done well for themselves, supplementing, you know, their income or what have you, with DM's Guild. But it's also sort of a show of, hey, I think this is worth something, because creators have a very hard time actually saying that their work is worth something. And it's almost in a way that I used it for myself to say, no, I'm actually good enough to be able to make something of this. It's there's I find kind of like this weird gray area of being the noble altruistic creator that's like, oh no, please, it's my generosity that I create things for you, versus but it would be very cool if I made money from this. And you try not to lean more towards one than the other, because people are often very humble and they have a hard time putting a price on their work. Or if you steer all the way into the dark side, which, of course, again, it's all great, metas are gray, but if you steer more into I'm going to make money off this, there is a kind of power struggle there, where it's like, well, are you doing it for the right reason because you're creative? If you know what I mean. It kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah, I completely get that. I mean, I see it too with some people. Some people, it shows a lot more the struggle they have with that balance than others. But yeah, no, I get that. I know it's something I go through myself, because I'll look at my stuff, or I'll like be in the middle of a project and halfway through realize I greatly undervalued my stuff, or I'll talk to someone after the fact and find out it's even worse than I thought. So yeah, I would definitely say that it is a thing, and finding that balance is so hard, because if you focus on one more than the other, it's not just your own content you hurt, but it's other people's too. It's like, it's not just you, it's a community at the same time. So when you have one person who's like pushing really hard to put out all this stuff and undervaluing, like, I feel like as creators we have a responsibility to say, hey, you're doing this really great thing, you really should be asking for more for this, you know. And I know that's one of the big things people are talking about with DM's Guild and how it's set up versus going to, I can't remember what it is, it's a something.io, where they're working on making it where it would benefit creators more and where it would create a better environment on that end, as well as, hey, you're sitting here creating stuff. So, I don't know if I made any sense there.
Oh no, it makes perfect sense. If you're not a creator, I recommend trying something to do so, and then you'll start to understand it. Because really, you know, DM's Guild, I was looking for the prompt to say it's time to start valuing my work, and not that as creators we don't value our work from the get-go. Because it all means if you are, I don't want to say true creator, because I am not the authority to say that, but if you are somebody who has the passion for creating, you know that is invaluable to you and you want to share that. But that's when putting the price tag on it seems weird to you, because you say, you know, you have this great like existential moment where it's like, but what truly is any of this worth? Like, it's almost like this Shakespearean soliloquy that every creator has. And you know, DM's Guild is kind of a perfect medium to begin exploring that venue, that path that every creator takes.
Yeah, I like I said, I would agree with that. I know I've got a mechanic I've been working on, and I've been playtesting it for over a year now. And while I know in X specific campaign setting it works really well, I don't know how well it's going to work in all these other ones. And it's like, can I really put it out after testing it only in this one very specific setting that no one else has played, because it's specific to my DM and my campaign now as well. And that's one of those things. Like, when does a person say, hey, this is something that's ready for other people?
Right. And I think that one of the major tests of when something is ready, because that's a great question. It's a great question. I think a lot of people really struggle with, because you can undertest something, and some people put things on DM's Guild without testing them at all. And I know for a fact sometimes there are aspects of the product that I might put out that are untested, and the only thing I really have to go off of is the precedent of what's out there, which is very important in creating 5e material. Is what precedent do you have for implementing something? So, you know, I think it depends on how you share the idea. Is that if you've been working on it for a year, then it definitely is working to a degree, but it might take the framing it of, well, if you are using it in a setting, then it works well in a particular setting like this for whatever reasons have you. A player of mine came up with a brilliant mechanic, which I won't disclose here, because if somebody went, oh yeah, perfect, throws that on DM's Guild, that would be my fault, and that would be very uncool. But they sorry?
That's a good point. I haven't thought of that. I might have to double check on things. I'll talk to you about that one a little bit later.
But they came up with a brilliant mechanic that works perfectly in the Ravenloft setting, And not so much for other settings. I mean, you can definitely utilize it, but the fact that it was created for the Ravenloft setting, because it emphasizes an aspect of Ravenloft in a beautiful way. You know, if you say this is a rule for Ravenloft because it creates XYZ effect, people can say, "Oh, this sounds like a great tool." But without that preface, without that context, it could be lost. And that's what's kind of so great about like a lot of the DM screens that come out for the different campaign settings. The Waterdeep DM screen is very different than the Curse of Strahd DM screen, but it's built with those in mind. The Waterdeep DM screen has the laws of Waterdeep, what you might find in somebody's pockets if you pickpocket them. Well, Curse of Strahd is like some Barovian name or encounter tables for wandering the mists at night or what have you. So by framing those contexts, it all works out perfectly.
See, and I wasn't aware of any of that. I've never had a DM screen, so I might have to sneak out and get some at some point.
I find it's a common occurrence, yeah.
Well, it depends on the setting you play on. If you work solely through custom campaigns instead of going off modules and stuff, that stuff seems like it may not be as relevant, especially if you're not aware that that's what's on the screens. You're like, all right, so I've got this thing that can hold dice and little notes. You know, this is what, me personally, what I was aware of was most of them are just 3 can hold notes and stuff. And I didn't know that there was things already on them outside of what's on the opposite side that the players get to stare at.
Right. Yeah.
Which I've studied those. They're gorgeous to look at.
Right. Like the standard one has like average charges for how much like does transportation cost like between cities, or varying increments of damage that might be challenging to deal with, like so from setback to dangerous to deadly for the varying levels of tier, like 1 through 5, 5 through 10, etc. Or even reminders of what the conditions do or things like that. They can be very helpful tools. And sometimes if you're, much like how we got here, if you're looking into creating something, sometimes creating these tools are an amazing avenue to start with, because the secret is, as any DM will tell you, we're really just looking for ways to make our lives easier while managing everything else in a world.
That one I can agree with. Would you say that's something that would be helpful even for people who DM with online games?
Yes, absolutely. Because even though online games, like so through Roll20, or even if you're playing through Discord, like that's how our Legacy of Eldrin game on Old Heart is going to work, is all just through Discord. You might not think that DM screen is necessary because we have the luxury of there's space out here. Like my hands didn't just stop existing; they're only right here. So because we only have this small like window to operate from, we don't have that necessary necessarily the feeling of, oh well, I have a space that I need to guard with a DM screen. But having those reminders, having those notes, not having to deal with tabs that you have to open and close and flip around, because that's one reason that's one challenge I have with online games. Like, well, which tab is that in? Oh, good. And I close Roll20 entirely. Go me! Yay! I'm gonna go have a sit down for a minute and think about what I did.
I can say, I get that. Last session I actually closed Roll20. I was like, oh, by the way, you guys don't need to see the rolls. Half of these are GM rolls and everybody should be seeing them anyways. What if I wanted to fudge something? I can't fudge anything because it's all right there for everybody to see.
Right. And that also, I think, touches on like what kind of, I wouldn't say etiquette, but something along the lines of, are you okay with the GM obscuring their roles? And that's one luxury that a DM screen does offer, is that realm of privacy. Which, online, I think there is often the worry that, oh, well, because it's online, it's so easy to cheat.
I've found it would be harder because the information's all right there.
Exactly. So by not being in a physical space, they're like, well, you could obscure anything. So if our dice rolls are in front of everybody, then therefore it's fair. Which, that is a piece of logic to follow. Not necessarily what works best for everybody, because sometimes it works both ways. The GM might say, they might roll the dice and say, oh, what's your armor class? Oh, 14. And theirs might be staring at a 19. But in a moment where they say, I don't want to take out this person because it's not going to fit the narrative, it's not going to, it's not going to result in somebody having a good time, then I don't want to execute this decision. But for the quick access information, like conditions for what you might find in somebody's pockets, what have you, they're fantastic tools. I might recommend a wider desk setup if you can, because mine is about, like, I have over here, like where you see this wall, and then like right here. So I can't really fit a DM screen back. Yeah, exactly.
But I also use like every inch of that real estate too. So
right,
that's like,
right.
Where would this go? I guess my lipsticks could
go. So if you can figure that out, or even if you could like somehow adopt the space where it's like, oh, well, maybe you won't use your keyboard for a little while, you can at least lay it there in front of you, or optimize your space that if you play a lot of online games, maybe consider making those accommodations so you can have it fit you. One of the beautiful things about this day and age in gaming is that we don't have to be at the same table anymore, right? We even use the term, oh, well, what about online gaming? And 10 years ago, that would have meant World of Warcraft or Call of Duty or Halo or whatever online games you might be playing, rather than let's play some Dungeons and Dragons online.
And like online as in, we're still playing D&D, we're not playing Dungeons and Dragons online, which is a totally different beast.
Absolutely. That's a very good thing to point out. Yeah. So it's, there's some people that, they play more online games than they play games in their own physical space. And I've met people who that works for a number of reasons, for health reasons, for scheduling reasons, that online tabletop sessions are more or less their main vehicle for engaging the game. So there's really nothing wrong by making your own physical space accommodate your hobby, your passion for this type of engagement with it.
I have to think about that with my own and figure out how I can kind of transition a bit for that. I mean, I know when I need a book, I have quick access. My books are all right behind me. It's just slide back, grab, slide back in. And I do that when I'm live a lot, even. Like, it's faster than pulling up a PDF and going through a PDF, because I've been in these books for 5 years now. A couple of them. From the get-go, and it's one of the things that my first DM started very quickly saying, you're going to be a DM. And I'm like, well, how do you know? It's like, well, there's the fact that the first day we met and we started playing together, you insisted on having access to the DM's guide, even though I said it wasn't absolutely necessary to play. You argued it was. Because you wanted to know everything inside and out. That's a DM approach right off the bat. I'm like, yeah, but that's then me telling people how we're doing things. That's not really based on. It's like, oh, watch, it'll happen. Okay, you were right.
That's a very wise individual. Yes.
What have been some of the highlights and the lights of the journey of creation for you?
So highlights, I'd say, meeting people throughout the community. It's definitely it's definitely rewarding when you have like these big moments where something gets shared a lot, and it often teeters the line of validation, which can be dangerous. Where, for instance, when we previewed the Elder Dragon Warlock, for those of you wondering, ooh, Dragon Warlock, yes, exactly. You basically make a pact with a very powerful dragon that bestows you powers similar but not completely the same as the Dragonborn, the Draconic Sorcerer. You get the ability to like grow wings and stuff. Not like the dragon. See, this is the problem of subclass design. So sometimes those themes just are too close. But I digress. When we released the dragon warlock subclass, it got like close to over 100 retweets, which is staggering for anything homebrew. People might call to gain that much attention. Or, for instance, when I was talking about on Twitter, and this is the great way that Twitter often inspires what I'm doing in a week, where I was writing an article about witches and the idea that, well, there's not a witch class in Dungeons and Dragons. Should there be one? Which is a whole argument itself, right? You could take so many different venues. You could say no, they're wizards, no, they're warlocks, no, they're druids, no, they're clerics, and right, exactly. See,
little bit of all.
It's a little bit of everything, and it's about establishing the lore. I know it's a big question. It's a big Pandora's box.
I would argue that the closest thing I've seen so far, I'm not sure if it was a conversion from 3.5, but yes, when I did start playing, I immediately dove into that D&D wiki looking for homebrew things, and Giants in the Playground, and there was a shaman class there. I would say out of everything I've seen, that's probably about as close as you get to a witch. Because yes, there's a witch one on there, but I personally wouldn't touch it.
Right.
It's not. Doesn't fit a witch for me. It's for other people, maybe doesn't fit.
Right, and and again, it definitely comes to the what version are you ascribing to? Is that you are like did you study it? Did you get it drawn from nature? Do you draw it? Right. So in this, it was a question of, well, how do you approach it? So somebody came by and mentioned Holly Conrad's character Strix, the Trash Witch, and they said, oh, you should. They said you should write a subclass based on Strix for @Holly Conrad, and Holly was like, yes, do that. I was like, oh no, Holly herself has even benedicted that there should be a trash magic subclass. Oh, woe is me. So
you're like, now I need to do this thing because Holly says so.
Exactly. And I wrote it in an hour and a half. Because my mind was racing. I was like, oh, she's watching, she's paying attention now. So I wrote an hour and a half, and it was very difficult, to be honest with you. The first bit of it that I wrote was so hard to wrap my head around, because one might ask, how do you create a trash magic subclass? What does that look like? What does that even begin to feel like? So what I wound up doing was I started taking idioms and phrases. So for instance, one of the abilities they get is called waste of space, where they actually manipulate space around them that it becomes difficult terrain, so people are wasting their movement to try to move around you. Where another one might be one ability is one mage's trash, which is you counterspell something and then you actually get sorcery points from it. So I did that in the course of an evening, posted and the following day, Holly saw it and retweeted it, and my phone nearly exploded right there and then on the spot, because for about the next 36 hours, like and retweet, like and retweet, like and retweet. And I was like, well, I need a new phone now, I guess, because that's not going to stop. And so that was, of course, the highlight, meeting and talking to great people like Rudy. It's those highlights, those are things where it's, you not only do you feel like you're part of the community, but it also feels like, it does feel like progress. Lowlights, it's as many of the tumultuous tumultuous pieces of navigating social media. Sometimes collaborations don't work. Sometimes the dynamic you might have with other individuals that you'd really like to work with doesn't pan out that way, because much like session 0, people want different things. So when things like that don't exactly go right, and of course I'm not going to name any, but when they don't exactly go right, it's hard not to take that personal. But the fact of the matter is that a community is made of diverse, different people, and fortunately in the D&D and TRPG community, we have a very diverse and inclusive group, which is a beautiful thing. But with diversity also comes difference. So that's something that, learning to navigate that. And of course, everybody puts their best self forward. But still, we shouldn't expect everybody to be a perfect match, right? There's definitely one person space and your own. Other lowlights might have also included lack of engagement is often one, wanting to share things with people. I once decided to say, oh, well, I'm not going to write a subclass this month. I'm going to talk about articles. I'm going to talk about things I'd like to, because eventually when you are gaining notoriety as a subclass creator and a content creator for the game itself, that's what people really expect. They're like, oh, well, give me this next new toy I can play with. It's like, why instead are you writing about your parents' first time playing D&D with you? Right? There's this moment where I'm writing about something very meaningful, and when I published that article in particular, it got maybe about a total of 4 or 5 likes, maybe even 1 retweet, and I was so hurt by that, because as opposed to something like Trash Magic subclass or the Elder Dragon Warlock, everybody just kind of looked at it, whatever.
Well, and I think that's one of those things where, despite what everyone says branding is everything, sometimes branding can hurt because everyone starts to expect this specific thing, and when you deviate, they're like, there's resistance because they've come to this thing of, this is what I expect, not this. What's this got to do? Hello, this is personal stuff. This is letting you in on stuff that maybe otherwise you wouldn't hear about, because not everyone's going to share these personal kind of things. So.
Right, absolutely, and I entirely agree about, sometimes branding hurts, because when someone says, oh, you're the insert title here person, the second, like you said, you deviate away from that, people suddenly scratch their heads and go, but you are a machine who creates this thing that we like. Why are you not? It's like, do you need to be brought in for inspection? Like, what? It almost reminds me of the game Paranoia, in which, friend computer is watching, and if you are broken, they suddenly haul you off away and you replace you with a clone that does what you're supposed to instead, which is a very funny game. But yeah, it's very much like that. It's, other things, and I wouldn't say similar, but in a different vein, is also watching things move through the community that are hard, like recent events that are very hard to watch and to witness. And even though you support the people that they are affecting and you want to remove negativity from it, these waves and ripples that being part of a community create, standing amidst that is very difficult, because we then have to restructure and reorganize and find out what does the community that we are part of really consist of.
Well, and I think that's one of the things I think a lot of people felt to a degree blindsided. I know myself with recent stuff, I wasn't so much blindsided, but that might be because as far as the online and tabletop gaming, I'm kind of new still. So for me, I'd already heard about other stuff, not necessarily particular people, but just the general thing of, hey, if you're a minority, you're used to this kind of treatment. But for a lot of other people, maybe they knew these individuals personally or not, there's an expectation to make a stance. And not everyone's comfortable doing that. Some people may not be comfortable doing that, and they'll get pushed back because they don't. And it's like, but do you guys have any idea why this person's not comfortable? Maybe they've experienced this in themselves and they don't want to relive that. Maybe they've experienced same or similar outside of tabletop. You never know that. That's one of the few things where they struggle with some of the judgment coming out against people who haven't made a stance yet. It's like, do you know every bit of this person's life? How can you say whether this person needs to make this stance now? There may be a very good reason they haven't.
Right, and there's of course time to process things and to really be able to formulate thoughts. And with one thing that springs to mind, and I always make the joke, the Spider-Man of D&D. So I'm frequently recalling the line, "With great power comes great responsibility." And so the more that you are meeting the public eye, there is a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation that sometimes can be daunting. And it's very easy to say when you are very much on the outer rim of something to be able to make a quick stand and say, yep, we work this way. We believe in, a safe and supportive community, XYZ, go through there. But the closer you are to that epicenter, that can be very daunting. So undoubtedly, I think you're absolutely right about that.
For me, it's similar to another community I was in for a long time that kind of exploded. It exploded in a different way, and that's just that it evolved into something else and lost the focus that it once had. It was this huge, mainly online charity organization with a drinking problem. I don't know if that tells. Well, the way they branded a lot of times was a drinking organization with a charity problem. I think that sounds familiar at all. And they moved away from, for the most part, a lot of it from the charity. There's still some chapters that the focus, first and foremost, was and still is charity. But that's, it's one of the communities I moved away from just because the overall thing, because locally, it was definitely more the drinking than charity.
Right, yeah, and that makes sense.
But yeah, definitely, when you have ripples through a community, it affects on so many different levels in different ways, and there's no way to really see how far it goes until it's blown over, really. And I think we're getting to the point where that's what needs to happen with the current stuff going on, is people just sit back, give it time to blow over, and then come back to look at things. But that's my opinion on it. Because it's been like a week now.
Right. And when we all very much crave things that are positive. But I think on the flip side is that the more learning people do, and I think that's kind of goes back to what the thesis of the Mage College learning is that we should be learning from experiences as a community together. And without that, without the learning aspect, there really is no growth. And it's very easy to get wrapped up in the negativity rather than saying, okay, this is how we move forward, and this is what we're going to do to better ourselves and make sure that everybody is on board.
So I think you may have touched on this. What has been your most well-received work so far?
So let's see, the Elder Dragon Warlock, definitely. Trash Magic subclass, more than definitely, my goodness. Let's see, I actually have the page open. I'll sift through quick to see. The multi-class mastery about the Master Thrower was actually very well received. And very recently, my revision of the Love Domain that I wrote, which was inspired a year ago by a discussion that I believe it was Teen Phoenix was having with somebody about, like, oh, well, there should be a love domain, and me being the rising can-do attitude creator was like, I volunteer as tribute to write the love domain. I started to look at it. And I was gonna make it very like charm based and like enchant until a hero of the local RPG community, Scott Brown, said to me, he's like, you know what? Hey, don't do that. Instead, think about how love is about compassion and community. And I started looking at the community at large, and people like Rudy, people like Matt Mercer, a lot of these other positive role models who focus on compassion. And so I created the love domain as about being a cleric of a generous, compassionate love. And recently I just posted the revision because I figured a year later, with having gained levels in content creator, that I should be able to create a better version of refine the mechanics. And I did, and it was very well received, which is great. It's like the first thing, if you're curious, you want to play Love Domain Cleric, go to TheMageCollege.com. It's the first one right there. Another really well received one was one of the first products. No, wrong word. That's the word we use on DM's Guild. One of the first playable races that we featured on the Mage College. That was a collaboration between Tahina Andale, who's from Wizards and Wardrobes and Gold Hearts, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and Curse of Strahd, and she created a she race, a sort of proper Fey noble that I revised, and we created. We pretty much came up with a 5e version of it. That was very well received because she had a very prominent role in the stream community through like Scraticus Academy, and that got picked up very quickly, and that was one of the first collaborative works that I did, because being a solo act is very different than working with somebody else, because not necessarily there was any arguing, but there's no one to debate with. And when you are creating mechanics and you're debating about them, then the topic of how D&D is subjective really comes into play. But that was one of our best received player options, and subsequently she worked with us for several months until she decided to focus on her own health and personal needs. But that's still there as a testament to her awesome contribution. Let's see if there's anything else that stands out. I've done far too much in my time. In the last 2 years I've been doing this. Circle of Stars Druid was another one, which it's basically about aligning yourself to the constellations and drawing power from pretty much astrological forces as a druid. And it's one of my personal favorites because I think it was the first druid I ever wrote, which, for the record, druids are really hard. they're insanely hard to write because they're already the most powerful spellcasting class.
I could see that. I mean, you got this inherent ability to completely change your shape and become something else within. Some people would say maybe it's not necessarily a reason that you could go one size smaller and one size larger. When you consider if you want to throw in like known physics to converting matter into energy back into matter, because that's essentially how that would work.
Right.
I thought about that at like that one point clearly, like, this is cool, but this makes no sense. Physically, of course this can't be real world, because real world, this just absolutely no way ever could.
Right. Does a druid in wild shape keep their density? Is that
right? I mean, that would mean a pseudo dragon wild shape could potentially become a black hole because of density at that point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you are familiar with Critical Role, if you watch the final battle royale they did, the reason why Keyleth, spoiler alert, wins the battle royale is because druids are nigh unkillable at 20th level.
Oh yeah. Far as casters, I think next most powerful if you're going on that route would have to be monks, because of very similar nigh unkillable with their stuff as well.
Yeah, monks definitely. They're very powerful in their longevity, and the fact that you can spend 4 key points at, I believe it's 18th level, for your empty body ability, is that you're invisible and you have resistance to all damage. Right? Like, who decided that was a good idea? Somebody, if I ever get a chance to go to Seattle and visit Wizards of the Coast, I'm going to say, who designed Empty Body? We need to have a stern talk right this instant.
I mean, at the same time, they don't have prestige classes right now. So I feel like if they had written stuff with the idea that maybe they didn't want to do prestige classes, at that point it makes sense to have stuff suddenly kick into OP overdrive at that point, because what if a person wants to play fast? Of course, you're not going to keep getting new things unless you decide we're going to write this extra stuff in. But as is, if you hit 20th level, you're done.
Right.
You don't have anything else. I mean, you've got casters out there with power words that do ridiculous things at that point. Like, I don't like you. Die. There's no save. Well, no, there is a save, but most creatures can't save from that. Most people can't save from that.
Right. If you're anything close to a decent caster, your saving throw DC for power word kill by that point is you're looking at least a 17, and that's if you have an intelligence of 16. So you're that guy who's like, oh no, I have a 20 in my intelligence. It's like, well, congratulations. Yeah, this is a DC 19. Save or die, which is not a phrase we use in 5e very often, but when it does happen, oh boy.
When creating new content for tabletop role-playing games, what process do you go through to make sure it's balanced for the game you're creating?
Oh, okay. So this is a very good question. I try to make sure everything has a precedent somewhere in the game, and that's not to say that I am ripping something off for already existing. I'm not just tacking things together or taping or stapling things from other classes into something new or something that I'm labeling as new. What I'm doing is I'm often making sure that there is something like it that exists. So say, for instance, coming up in Legacy of Eldrin, one of our players is a Whisper Knight. And a Whisper Knife is a ranger that a ranger subclass that I wrote based on a 4E, what do they call them? It wasn't a Paragon Path, it was one lower than that. It was, okay, for those of you who haven't played 4E because of all that around 4E, the legend of 4E and the black sheep in They did something similar to archetypes, where at particular levels you would insert this kind of archetype sort of thing. Whisper Knife was one of them, but I reimagined it as a ranger archetype. And so this is actually a conversation I was having today with Kana, is that I created an ability called Reticent Strike. And what that does is, starting at 3rd level, you can imbue your attacks with basically this sort of bitter essence of silence, like just channeling like psychic damage into your weapon. And so once per turn, as it existed, you could deal an additional d6 damage when you hit a creature with a weapon attack. And then if you had advantage on the attack roll, you can force the creature to make a charisma saving throw against your spell save DC. And then if they failed to save, the creature wouldn't be able to speak or produce any sound until the end of your next turn. Which, there's a few things in there that are pretty similar to existing things. So the main idea behind it was basing it similar to sneak attack. But where I went wrong, even though there are plenty of rangers that say, oh, well, I'm going to Slayer's Prey, this guy is the Monster Slayer's special type of Hunter's Mark, and you can just add a d6 every turn. And then using while you have advantage, it does something extra, right? That's modeled after sneak attack itself. So by comparing those things and saying, okay, at 3rd level, I might expect something like this, then I know it's okay to proceed forward. Like, nobody at 3rd level has immunity to all damage, can turn invisible and fly, all in the same breath, and then, and then still be a 3rd level character. That's just impossible. Or like, for instance, in the Chaotician subclass, if you're so kind to go to DM's Guild and contribute that way, Chaotician has a 3rd level. It's called Misfortune's Favor, I think is what I named it. Naming conventions are hard. That's another thing, but that's a different story. Naming things is always the worst. But there is an ability they have where their core concept is they can actually curse a number of people with this ability of theirs. And what Misfortune's Favor does is that for every person you curse, you get a particular bonus going forward on all of your ability checks, attack rolls, etc. And this is like a weird mechanic that doesn't appear anywhere else in the class features. But it does, in the inverse, in the form of a penalty, appear on a monster called the Elder Oblex in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foe. And the Elder Oblex itself is a creature of CR 10. So the logic I used was that if you can see this penalty coming from a creature at 10th level, then there's no reason you wouldn't be able to have a bonus similar to it at 13th level as a rogue. So sometimes it's about being a little bit more aware of the game at large, but still finding the wedge of where these things can fit based on what the precedent you have is.
Makes sense. I know I at one point put thought to creating my own subclass for a game, and I ended up being like, you know what, this is a bit extra work, but I know a lot of work can go into that, or even if you're just converting from previous editions, if it's something that hasn't already. I think the one time I did do a conversion was it's called the Dancing Dervish, something like that. It was either from 3.5 or 4. Path of the Whirling Dervish, I think it was. It was a barbarian subclass though.
Gotcha.
Which I would very much love to see that actually get implemented by me, because it was a dex-based barbarian, and it was loads of fun. And I missed that character. It's the only character that I've ever played that actually died, though. She didn't die.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. That is unfortunate. I was gonna say that's interesting that you did as a barbarian subclass, because that makes sense. So the dervish, I do remember from 3.5. My wife played a dervish for a good while. She still plays the same character, just now in a different form. But I actually wrote a dervish as a fighter archetype based on the same thing. And so that kind of finding that space of where they belong is also part of the challenge, especially if you're resurrecting something from previous editions, because, you know, you're not wrong in that the dervish dance is a lot like rage, right? But somebody else might argue, well, it's a lot like blade singing, and wizards do blade singing, so we could just give it to something else. And finding these weird little spaces to put them is kind of part of the challenge of having an archetype system. Because where us veterans from 3.5 are like, oh, well, you know, we had prestige classes. We could be whatever, however we wanted to do it. As long as we landed in our prestige class, we were happy. Now it's like, oh, well, there's this sword guy, that sword guy, this sword guy over here. This class also has a sword thing, and I don't know which one I want to go with.
I think the closest people, and I think my point brings up a good point, is at this point, to get some of the things, you really do need to multi-class unless you are going to customize things outside of what's already there.
Oh yeah, it's part of, you know, looking at multi-classing is actually what I do. I have a sort of like step of like particular like doors that I walk through before I decide this is a theme I'm going to pursue in a subclass that I'm creating. Because reflavoring is a powerful tool. Like if you look at Battlemaster, you could easily reflavor that to like a magical fighter that's like a lunge is like a slight teleport. Menacing is like you look more frightening when you do it with this like magical aura. Trip might be like as you hit them, a vine wraps from your sword and pulls their leg out from under them, but all the mechanics are staying the same. Part 2 is, can you multi-class it? One reason I have never tried to write my beloved prestige class from 3.5, Arcane Duelist, is because by multi-classing Swashbuckler and College of Sword Bard, you can very easily create an Arcane Duelist without having to now somehow find the perfect place to fit that concept, because it almost, like Dervish, fits in too many at once. If I say Arcane Duelist, is it a fighter? Is it a rogue? Is it a bard? Because part of what we try not to do is to step on too many toes. And that's half the challenge of doing this. So you're absolutely right. Like, where do they come in? I don't really know. It's all conjecture. And that's part of what they're doing at Wizards, where, like, for instance, if you followed along with the Monster Slayer, that was originally a fighter archetype before they said, actually, let's make that a ranger archetype. And it does work. It does work better. But there's no reason it couldn't have stayed in fighter.
I'm going to say now's a good time to take a break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back, guys. Okay, so we've talked a lot of stuff so far. There will be a Q&A when we're done with the structured question portion. If you guys have questions, feel free to post in the chat, !Q followed by the question, and we will get to those later. For now, have you had any thoughts to creating your own tabletop RPG?
Yeah, I've got a few of them, a few concepts in the works. There have been a number of things, both TheMageCollege and other things that are much more in the midst that I'm not really allowed to talk about. But as far as my own work, I have one game in very early development called NPCs the Coping, which is a powered by the Apocalypse game, so same system as Dungeon World and City of Mist, with a 2d6 system, where the concept of it is the players play characters that would normally be NPCs in a game, and then they have to deal with the shenanigans of the adventuring party coming through and ruining their town. So instead of the usual where they are the this to a poor township, they instead have to now cope with it. So it gets you playing things like the mayor or the city guard, or my personal favorite character, the fruit merchant, which is inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the My Cabbages guy. Like that's kind of like the repertoire that you're dealing with here. So it's a great way to, with everybody's permission, like poke fun at your party and the things that happen, and then kind of say, look at what you make me deal with as a dungeon master.
My cabbages bit, that reminds me of Darkness Rising with the sorceress.
Yes, exactly. Right. And there is technically in this game no dying. So it's like, yeah, with the sorceress, like she blows up the one random guy, and there's like the fruit cart that I believe gets vandalized. I haven't seen the movie in so long. It's amazing. It was I actually saw that before I started playing D&D, so that was kind of like my framing for it. But yeah, there's no dying in this game, because if you die, you just simply get replaced with another NPC of the same type. So it's like, oh, well, that was the old fruit merchant, but now we brought in this guy. We just kind of found him on the street. And it doesn't matter, because nobody ever really looks at NPCs. It's got sort of the same charm as Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, if you're familiar with that play. Another game we're working on is called Whose Quest Is It Anyway?, which is very much inspired by Whose Line Is It Anyway?, which playfully combines Dungeons and Dragons and Cards Against Humanity. Which basically the concept is you have a bunch of cards that will either make the adventure, or it's stuff in your inventory, or it's who you are as a character. So you might be a paladin with an oath of unreasonable fear of R2D2. And so it's like, you tell me, what does that look like? What does this oath with an unreasonable fear of R2D2 look like? What powers does it give you? And then you kind of just make it up as you go, with a DM pretty much advocating things as they come. So you might say, okay, well, I'm going to slay the dragon with my greatsword of incontinence. It's like, you tell me what that does. And
oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
So much poo.
Yeah, and it's like, does that mean that it affects your character, or does anybody you hit with it? And you kind of, almost like a super fight, if you're familiar with that card game, kind of talk about how these things work, and just, you're really going for just maximum silliness. It really started from a game of, it originally was designed like Mad Libs, almost in a way, and then it kind of progressed to this Cards Against Humanity style, just what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be polite about it. This mayhem, this train wreck in action that is Whose Quest. And then the third one, the least concepted and like the biggest one, is a game called Chronicle and Tale, which looks at the idea of narrative style storytelling and makes it modular in both settings you can use. So you could easily do a high fantasy D&D, or you could also do something like, for instance, like a steampunk style game, by basically taking the same game and making it all very character and narrative heavy, where you pretty much pick the archetypes you want. So if you want to be a noble scoundrel, you can build that. If you want to be a skyship captain, librarian, you can do that. It's pretty much about how these interesting backgrounds and descriptions make this unique character that is ultimately one of the main characters. It features narrative-based leveling up. So, for instance, you don't gain XP normally, you instead achieve things. So when you achieve something that would be pivotal for a Sky Captain Librarian, did you find a lost library somewhere on a floating continent? Did you maybe find a new blueprint for an engine piece that will, really make your ship go a lot faster? Something like that. So it's the furthest one out that needs the most tinkering, but these are all three things that we're really excited to come on.
That sounds really, really awesome. What system have how were you first introduced to tabletop role-playing games, and what was your first game like?
So now mind you, before we found the magic that eventually path of being Archmage Derek, I was invited to a 4E game that was hosted by my college's gaming club, and it was a little bit of a mess because there was like already 10 people in this game. Yeah, and it was 4E. And I didn't know what the numbers meant. Like, I had played the PC Neverwinter game a little at that point, but like, I didn't know how AC worked. I didn't know what ability modifiers were. I kind of had like a brief idea of like, okay, so dexterity is how good with the swift thingy I am. Sure. And I played an elf sword mage because that sounded coolest. So, and it was weird. Like, we jumped right into combat. Nobody really knew what was going on, or at least I didn't. And honestly, I'm surprised that I got into D&D after the fact, because when a couple years later our friend group said, "Hey, we should play D&D," I went, "Not this again!" Like, and the weird thing was that they said, "Oh, but we also need a dungeon master. Who's going to do it?" And I was like, wait, if I do it, I can make it fun and interesting and engaging. And turned out it's exactly the same type of style of game that's become very popular and has spawned things like Critical Role, where I was like, oh, let's just make a really neat story. And that was ultimately what got me hooked.
See, and I didn't get into D&D until 5e myself, and that wasn't despite earlier interest. I'd rolled quite a few characters, and we just never got around to playing. And for me, I think with what I've heard about how math heavy it was previously, I think I'm kind of glad, because I'm fairly certain I would have been turned off at that point, because we do math. I'm horrible at it, and it would have been frustrating not just for me, but for other players, because of the time it would take me to figure things out. I've had people explain THACO to me, and I'm sitting there like, this makes no sense still. I don't think I would have gotten into THACO. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it. People are really into math. I've heard a lot of people say, well, who wants to play a game to do that? Well, there are people who enjoy playing math. Math majors would absolutely love it. My mom told me that she played D&D for a bit in high school. Of course, talking to her since then, I found out she only played because her boyfriend was playing it that was like the only way they could spend time together.
Mm.
But I feel if she had gotten in when Thaco was in, she may have stuck around with it. Because that's right up her alley.
Gotcha. Yeah, I started in, when I officially started DMing, we actually went backwards into 3.5. And then for a while we picked up Pathfinder, which some people regarded as the spiritual successor of 3.5. And the math was yes daunting. But the jump to 5e actually took us a little while, because we're like, well, wait, where are the big numbers? Like, I can't get like a plus 20 to something anymore. Like, which there was this weird thing where we felt like our character is getting dumbed down. Is this? And in reality, it's not. It was becoming more accessible, and that's what makes what I do and other creators like me their lives more easy, because we don't have to do this insane math of, oh, well, can I give somebody a plus 25 on a roll and call it a day? The answer, in short, in 5e is no, of course you can't. That's insane. Why would you do that?
No, outside of, like, potential rule of cool things, but I think with rule of cool, you don't necessarily need bonuses. You sit there and say, you know what? That sounds awesome. Yeah, we'll do that.
Right. And so you say, it sounds awesome, you get advantage, or you just go, yeah, it works that way. Like, and that's what's nice about 5e, because it takes away those weird little things. Like in 3.5, you could get a +1 bonus on attack roll if you were on a table attacking them and they were on the floor. And then if you were using like an offhanded weapon, that's another penalty. And I'm really upset with how many of those like numbers are still floating in my head from those days. And now that I think of how 5e works, it's like, I'm so glad I don't have to consider any of that now.
What systems have you played, and which ones have been your most and least favorites?
So outside of the D&D family progression and Pathfinder, I've played Cypher System. Cypher System is a great game. For those of you less familiar with it, Cypher System is another D20 style game written by Monty, a very pivotal player in the creation of D&D 3.5. It basically kind of turns the whole math thing on its head, and you're really just shooting for numbers. You can play it in any sort of different way, because it's really made to subsist throughout different genres, and there's a number of different settings within it, from Numenera, which is the most popular one, and like the first one that came out was The Strange, which is very like, well, kind of like Doctor Strange mysticism, like shifting worlds things. Then they recently came out with Invisible Sun, which uses the same system, which to me it's a great system. At first it's a little hard to like wrap my head around, because it uses the idea of like an expenditure system. So the same like source that is like your hit points is also how you feel like doing better. So like my D&D player mind says like, no, I can't lose hit points. That's insane. What's wrong with you? It's like, you're gonna destroy yourself. But adjusting to that, it's a very fun game. It allows for a lot of creativity, and there's a lot of fun interactions between like what the GM has powers for and what the players can do. And it very much focuses on the collaboration part of it. I'm also a huge fan of Fantasy Flight Games' Genesis system, which people more commonly know as the same system that powers the Star Wars games, the Edge of the Empire games, which that's all a narrative dice system where there's not even math. It's you roll these particular dice, pretty much subtract the symbols and see what's remaining, and then you describe how the scene progresses based on those symbols remaining. It's a beautiful system. It's a lot friendlier than math looks. The only hang up is that the dice are like $15 a pack or something like that. So it's more than most people want to buy. But it's a great system. If you're a fan of Star Wars, oh my gosh, please play Edge of the Empire. I've played Call of Cthulhu.
If I'm correct, that uses the Fate system dice, right?
It uses something very similar to the Fate system. I would describe it as sort of like the fate systems. The fate system stood in line at the iPhone store and got the iPhone 10. That's how I would describe those dice. So it's very much similar to that concept, with a little bit more of a nuanced, not quite as rules light approach to it. I've also tried Call of Cthulhu, which was interesting. I liked, and we did this really neat feudal Japan set Call of Cthulhu system. Was the one time I played it. I thought that was pretty neat. It was a little bit more combat oriented than Call of Cthulhu usually gets. I haven't had much experience with it since. Dungeon World is another great game that I love. Much in the vein of D&D, because I'm all about high fantasy. You can't pull me away from high fantasy for anything. But Powered by the Apocalypse games, also like Cypher System, or not Cypher System, excuse me, City of Mist. City of Mist is an awesome like noir superhero game. There really hasn't been like much of anything I don't like. 7th Sea was probably the most challenging of other systems I've tried, because it tries to minimalize rolling and minimalizes. It's then telling you precisely how to like use the rolls in this kind of weird like raise point buy system. It's a little confusing, even though I ran 12 sessions of it on a stream on Scraticus Academy, and I kind of still to this day, I'm not entirely sure how the game works.
Like, we did this thing. I'm still confused on how it worked. It worked.
Well, yeah,
but I'm still...
a little bit. And, you know, I just kind of had to advocate with like, yeah, I guess this works. Because basically what it does is, for pretty much every factor in a situation, you're using this pool of successes that you're getting to pretty much make sure that none of those things that could go wrong are going wrong.
So but maybe the opposite of the Doom system?
Maybe. I haven't tried the Doom system, so I wouldn't know.
It's a thing in Conan, and it's been... sometimes we give Scrap lots of Doom, and other days we're like, no Doom for you.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. I can actually tell. Like, yeah. In essence, yes. It sort of works the opposite of that, where the GM is saying, yeah, these are all the things that can and might go wrong. How do you avoid them? Please tell me to what degree you avoid them. Which, as a GM, I don't really like telling people what can go wrong, because I'm not thinking about every single aspect. Like, I'm thinking of the overall aspect. It's like, oh, swing across this cliff, and like obviously falling is bad, right? But if you say, okay, I'm gonna swing across the cliff, in my mind you only need one success, right? In 7th Sea, it's telling you need to swing across the cliff, you need to land, you need to make sure your footing's like, it really like breaks things down into a bigger picture, where they're like, oh, well, you want to cross the room, avoid the fire, pick up the documents, jump through the window. It's like, whoa, please, one step at a time, which is a lot more the speed of games we normally see, like in D&D. So there are many things I like about 7th Sea, but the core mechanic is very challenging.
Sounds like it is very much tailored towards people who are big on planning and being like, all right, I need to like sit here, map all this out, because there are people who that is their approach to life. Hey, these are the steps I need to take. This is the order. This is what needs to happen, and if it fails here, this is what most likely happens. I think the Doom system's different because you're not told what could go wrong. You're told, all right, you can do this, or you can let me have a couple points Doom and do this instead.
Right. Yeah. I think that's actually a very good way of putting it. That honest to me right now, you've given me the gift of understanding. Like, yeah, that is apparently how 7th Sea is supposed to work. Because that's the beauty of TRPGs, is that all of them are built with a different mindset for sometimes different audiences who prefer a different venue. And so I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Awesome. that was just extrapolating based on, because I haven't played 7th Sea. I believe I watched. Oh, I know the name. I can't remember right now. Wax Steven was doing his MC thing, and I remember being confused for a bit on what was going on, and I was like, "Well, this isn't quite my speed, but interesting if I could just figure out where this stuff's coming from." So I think that makes it a little bit easier to understand because there was no context when I jumped in. It was like halfway through a campaign, halfway through an episode. It's like,
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. What kind of things do you do to prepare yourself both as a player and a character before your games?
I think it depends on the character. I often play characters that, oh no, I shouldn't say that. Some of them tend to be very similar to me. Some of them tend to be very similar to what I believe. So I have one character named Derthalion, who has been my main go-to character for 5 years now. You know, I know him inside and out. He's kind of like if you combined Tangled's Flynn Rider with Matt Smith's 11th Doctor from Doctor Who. Yeah. So, you know, you get this guy who goes around trying to be the best hero he can be. His name literally comes from the Tolkien Elvish great hero, and that's what he aspires to be. I was on Kayla RPG's Firelight episode where she gave me a plot hook and I ignored it simply because she handed me this broken-hearted NPC that Derthalion said, no, I have to fix him first. I can't move on with this quest until I fix this guy's life. She's like, but all you need, and like, Derthalion had taken over. He's like, no, actually, this is what's happening now. I have to go help him because this is what heroes do. Like, I just know that. I just know that's how Derthalion responds to things. Some characters, like, there's a character I play named Vindalis. And Vindalis is a poisoner alchemist. Alchemist is a class written by Rich Howard, who's a very talented game designer, and a hero of mine in this community. And Vindalis is essentially a wood elf who was a scientist who uses weird mutagen on himself, and he basically now has the mindset of a cobra in humanoid form. So he's nothing but like murderous in this like kind of curious alien way, and it's like that's not who I am as a person. So I kind of like just have to like sit and enjoy a very morbid like sense of humor, like. Well, technically, a gnomish body can only hold so much poison. I wonder what the breaking point of a dwarf body is. They are resistant from what I hear. Like, it's just like this very weird music. Oh, well, like, how can I kill things? But it's like, it's neat. And it's just sitting with the character's, like, mindset and just exploring it. Because, you know, I had a background in acting. I did a lot of stage acting before I even picked up Dungeons and Dragons, and it's weird because, you know, I look for touchstones and things, but at the same time I also just kind of like look at playing with a mindset and ask myself, what does a character do and who are they? So playing someone like Derthalion, who's heroic and great and kind and nice, and then playing Vindalis, who is weird and broken and this alien of a person that just likes experimenting with poisons. Like, oh, you know, I discovered a very powerful new neurotoxin today that I'd like to try. I wonder if I could find a volunteer. Yeah, exactly. It's like,
I have a volunteer. Arguin would be all over that. those elves together would be bad.
That sounds like it would be a bad time. And like, yeah, like that's, see, and you instantly know, like, it's just knowing, oh, well, that checks all these boxes for this character.
I just imagined it. It's like, oh, we can't put my danger druid in the same room as your danger.
I would love to see that. Hopefully that happens.
Oh. Maybe I'd have to get the extra information on her that my DM for that campaign has kept secret still. She was slowly turning into a moon dragon last time we played her. She had translucent, what's the other word? It wasn't just translucent. You know, the really colorful, shiny thing going on.
Oh, iridescent.
Yeah, translucent iridescent scales popping up. She had a on her face and on her arms.
Huh.
I never updated her illustration to that because I was like, at that point, I don't know how to do that. I wasn't doing anything digitally at that point because I didn't even have a computer then. So, I think.
Yeah, iridescence is a hard artistic effect to achieve.
Yeah. Oh, I can easily do it with digitally because layers and
right.
you can do that. But a little bit harder when you're working with color pencils.
No doubt.
What kind of things do you do to prepare yourself as a GM?
On a good cycle between games where I'm prepared, I'm normally just thinking about cause and effect. Because one thing that GMs often shy away from is the idea of consequences, which is, depending on the game, perfectly fine. If you're playing a game where, you know, the idea is Strahd von Zarovich is watching over you, and depending on what you do, Strahd will react accordingly. Or in Waterdeep, in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, there is a very strict code of law that if you do this, and then the punishment is X. Right? Well, thinking about cause and effect, especially like say in the example of Curse of Strahd, is that if the players go to Vallaki and do something and cause all this chaos, the way that the Barovians around them react creates the entire substance of the next session. And even though there is, an overarching goal where it's like, oh, go here and do this, you can populate it with so much just by exploring, whatever consequence, whatever natural progression comes next. And in even inventing characters that are the embodiment of that consequence.
Excuse me. What are your favorite styles of play and why?
Favorite styles of play, as in like tone, or or just like kicking the door beer and pretzels, or narrative style, or I can do both. So for me personally, I love swashbuckling style games. When you're, like we talked about earlier, that's just who I am as a person. Any game that involves Derthalion like bursting through a window and then getting into a giant like elaborate sword fight on top of like a moving carriage, perfect. Like that's entirely my bread and butter. But for ultimate like style of game, I love a healthy mix of narrative and role-playing and acting, but also engaging with the game. Sometimes you have sessions where people say, oh, we didn't even roll the dice at all tonight, and I'm like, but that's not really engaging with the game entirely. But then there's times where people say, oh, well, we didn't do narrative at all and we just did fighting. I'm like, not that either. I love a healthy mix of meeting the narrative and the mechanics to create an experience that engages both. Because if you have die rolls that go a particular way, that can sometimes do more for the narrative than just saying, oh, well, I'm going to go and do this, and then that happens. Because if you simply say, oh, I go and this happens, there is no question there. What a story is driven by is by the question. If I'm playing as Derthalion and I burst through a window, land on a carriage, break out into a sword fight. Question is, do I win? Do I land on the carriage? Can I beat these guys? But in a session where there is no question other than, oh, well, I'm going to expand on my backstory or expand on the dialogue at hand, and even though we are given the insight into a character, it is not necessarily furthering, the question of where do we stand in the progression.
Understandable. Yeah, no, as far as styles, I know there's so many different ways to look at it too. So when I do ask that one is more of a broader question because first of all, there's no right or wrong answer to it.
Absolutely.
So this is the potential dumpster fire question given the week.
Sure.
Within the tabletop community itself, what has your experience been? What do you think is done really well, and what could be improved?
Ooh, okay, cool. Do I feel like being crucified an hour later? So my experience with the community, like I said previously, the tabletop gaming community is a very diverse one. And it is a fantastic source to grow and learn, not only as a person, but also as a professional, and as a community member. Because I don't think I've really, even in my 27 years of life, ever felt like I've been this involved in something. And, even as a guy who, went to a normal college. Is any college normal? I don't think so. But as a guy who, who socialized frequently, who, engage in acting and, experience a fair share of what cliques or personal drama might have looked like, I've never been even so engaged with something such as this. So it's been overall a good one where, it takes a lot of self-discipline and humility, because as a creator, there's the slight drive to be like, but I matter, and then, look at me, and which it's sometimes hard to stave off, because where the same urge to share one's creations also can kind of lead in that same urge to step up on the pedestal. What I think could be improved. That one's a hard question. I think maybe just how much that, people take the time to engage with other people's work. I've been trying to press on myself more to actually have a better understanding of what other creators are doing. And even, hit like and retweet. Even if I only read half the article, by liking and retweeting, other people are getting a chance to see their work. Because I think that some people don't engage with art or writing or half the things that a lot of the creative people in the community do, simply because they're too busy just scrolling through. And they'll be like, yep, okay, oh yeah, no, I saw that. And if someone stops and really engages with your work, that's awesome. But they might not go that extra step of saying, I'm going to make sure that other people see it.
I'd agree. And that's one of the things I know. Probably about a month and a half back, Twitter started talking about taking away the like button. And there is a dire consequence to that, especially within the creative community, because, at this point, likes are one of the best ways for our stuff to get out there, because a lot of people aren't in practice of retweeting, which is really, really powerful. It would mean everybody making a drastic change to habits and being like, all right, liking isn't enough because it's gone now. Because they decided there's not enough engagement based off likes alone. And they're right, people are more likely to engage with something that someone retweeted versus something someone liked. So on the one hand, it makes sense. On the other hand, ouch, please don't.
Right. Absolutely. And you're right that they are weighed differently. Is that, I'm quicker to like something than I am to retweet it. Simply because in the back of our minds we're thinking, but do I want that to be in my feed? Because I just tweeted a bunch. Do I want to seem that annoying that I'm adding something else to what is coming out of my vector in this?
Or is this something that fits with the kind of stuff I want to put out? Or do I want to bury my own stuff?
Right,
That's one of the dangers with retweeting. It's one of the things I've learned myself to be mindful. Hey, did I just put out an announcement? I should probably wait at least 5 minutes before I retweet someone else's stuff. But there's so much that happens in that 5 minutes. It's like, oh, I want to share that, but I don't want to bury my own thing that I just put out.
Mm-hmm.
So it would drastically change the balance on stuff, I think.
Oh yeah,
there's a check and balance there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's strange that a good part of what we do is based in algorithm rather than the merit of even it being there. That I'm seeing things from 3 days ago when sometimes it's taking me a hot second to see things from 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that's evolved and changed over time. They go back and forth between how stuff shows up on the feed too, and that's
right.
That's Twitter for you. Sometimes they want everything to be in order because they've had enough of people saying, "Hey, I'd really like to know about this thing that happened 30 seconds ago before I know about this thing that was 3 months ago. Please and thank you." But at the same time, sometimes that thing from 3 months ago is still relevant. So there's a balance to be had. What do you think you could do yourself to improve the tabletop community with the room there is, or improvement?
Well, like I had said, being better, more self-aware of my supporting others. And I think I could definitely be, more open about experiences that I've had. And using what platform I've had at insert number here, followers, to say, hey, this would be helpful to the community at large to consider this, and to a degree I tried to do that already, but there's this kind of what I like to call the Twitter voice, which is that the term that I use for whenever someone says, I'm making a statement about this, it's normally because that's what's bothering you at the moment, and you're going to just throw that out there. It's like, hey guys, this is a point I'm making about this thing. Probably because it's been eating at me and I have to say it, or it's going to continue to do so, which will often color what the message comes out across as. So I definitely want to do more of that's the word I'm looking for, by thinking through and planning out what I want to say, not for the sake of my being able to say something and have it out there, but for my being able to share an idea for the sake of the betterment of the community and my own personal statement of how I want to improve.
I can see that. I know that there's something to be said for platforms people have on ability to speak up too. And that's one of those things that I'm noticing is becoming more and more of a nuanced thing as people become more aware of just how diverse the community is and, where minorities lay and, hey, what can we help? What should we help? What is stuff that we maybe don't have room to speak on, but maybe we can show solidarity on versus taking someone else's voice, and figuring that out. That's gonna be a thing, I've noticed, just within the last couple months, a huge shift in that and how that's happened. It's getting to a point where, sometimes it is very confusing because something that once upon a time may have seemed like a very good thing to do is in fact harmful sometimes.
Right.
Because
Right.
voices are important, and
absolutely.
And I think it's the same when sitting at a table. I know one of the things I experienced for a long time, and I know, that other people I were playing with didn't quite understand, was how often I was spoke over. It's like, hey, I've spent 5 minutes trying to say something, and we've moved completely past stuff to where what my character would have said or done is now completely irrelevant because I want to say something and someone had my name spoke up. I think that's where the card system that's been introduced, was originally, from what I understand from game codes and stuff, that started to be used more widely just around tables in general, is a really powerful thing. Is the ability to say, hey, either you're not comfortable with something, or your voice isn't being heard, or it's something that works well as a balance system that before wasn't really considered in the same way. At least from what I've experienced in 5 years.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, and one challenge to all of this is that there's not necessarily a guide for it other than, the moral compass, which most of us hope have pointing in the same direction. But there's a lot of things where, these nuances that, depending on where you're from, or, when you were raised or whatever, there are differences that people are still learning, and nobody has produced a handbook of what we're doing or what we're trying to do, and it's about having to be aware of what is going on and what is shifting and what is moving. And hopefully people take an interest in that to be able to adapt quickly, to be able to stay up to speed, and fill their themselves with positive ideas, positive outlooks, positive attitudes. And it's, but otherwise, sometimes that's a challenge. Like, sometimes people have to point out to me, like, oh, hey, this thing isn't exactly the right thing in this instance. And then, upon explaining to me, I can go, oh, okay, I'm very glad to know that. Thank you for enlightening me. I would not have known that otherwise without your. I'm very glad you from whatever problems that have come.
Would you say it'd be fair to say that maybe it's more of a willingness to have an open mind to learning? Because sometimes it's not always about positive end. There's something to be said where there's a point of pushing positivity to the point where it becomes a negative.
Absolutely. I absolutely. I think the ability, I think the willingness to do good and to find that true moral compass needs to be accompanied with an open mind. Because otherwise you're never going to adapt. No learning, no leveling up happens if you can't gain XP. And for us as social creatures, you need to be able to have love.
I completely agree with that. Okay. I think at this point we're ready for the Q&A. I don't see any questions though. Ooh.
See, anybody, anything?
Not question-wise. Aw, that happens sometimes. We could have just covered a lot of questions in the process too.
I know we encompass everything. I'm surprised that there's anywhere left in the universe that is to be explored. But
that's a whole nother subject that once upon a time I knew a lot more about. There's some brain rot that's happened over time there.
I'll just take the Hitchhiker's Guide random impossibility drive and just go somewhere random. That's my that's my guidance system.
Okay. Well, if nobody has any questions, you have anything else you'd like to share?
other than thank you very much for having me, if you guys are interested in finding me on the internet, you can find me at archmage_Derek on Twitter or over on TheMageCollege.com, where I create subclasses, as you've heard about for the last couple hours now, and you guys have been so wonderful for joining us. And again, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for being on my show. It's been great having you. If you guys would like to keep up with Derek, as he said, you can find him on Twitter at archmage_Derek, and you can also check out his work on MageCollege.com as well as on the DM's Guild. Mage College also has a Patreon if you guys would like to check that out. Great. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
If you would like to keep up with Derek, you can find him on Twitter at archmage_Derek, as well as you can find his work over on TheMageCollege.com. This has been RPG Unlimited. You can find my show here on Twitch every other Friday, and it goes up on Patreon the following Saturday, as well as over to YouTube on Tuesday and anchor.fm/RPG-Unlimited Unltd on Thursday. If you aren't already following, be sure to hit the follow button and turn on notification if you've enjoyed your time here today. I can also be found on Twitter and Instagram at TornPixieTwitch, as well as on Facebook at TornPixie, and I have an open Discord server. I have a merch store as well on Redbubble with gear for both RPG Unlimited and for TornPixie, talking about mugs, stickers, phone cases, t-shirts, more. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. You guys have made this stream awesome. We will see you guys next time. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. See you later.